In the kingdom of Valentia, where winds carried the scent of violets over rolling hills and sunlit streams, there stood an ancient castle with tall limestone walls and arrow slit windows. Tales of splendor and intrigue wove through its corridors, just as vines clung to its outer stones. By night, torches along the ramparts glowed like beacons, illuminating a domain that felt both forbidding and mysterious. This fortress had witnessed centuries of triumphs and sorrows, yet through it all, it remained steadfast, guarding secrets that not even its own inhabitants fully knew. A man named Emil tended the castle's gardens, a quiet fellow, scarcely known beyond his work. He rose at dawn each day, carrying for newly potted plants and kneeling in the damp soil to coax life from sleeping seeds. He had once dreamed of being an artist, painting bright scenes on canvas, but life's twists led him to this profession. Still, he found solace in plants, believing they had as profound a story to tell as any painting. He could sense their emotions in the tilt of a leaf or the soft blush of a newly opened bud. In their blossoming, he found comfort and a sense of purpose. One afternoon, talk buzzed within the castle. A new noble visitor was arriving. Word spread that this noble had come from a distant land to negotiate alliances with Valentia's royal court. Rumors trickled in that she was not only known for her proficiency in politics, but also for a peculiar fascination with rare flowers. Their shapes, their delicate petals, their secret scents. She appreciated them beyond their beauty. Always, it was said, she sought the story a flower told. Emile heard of this from the head steward while repotting lavender sprigs. He was told the castle staff would need to be at their best to greet the visitor. Lord Andrik insists the gardens look perfect, the steward said curtly, and Emile responded with a careful bow. Perfection in the garden was something he strove for daily, though no one ever truly noticed. Yet now, eyes from distant horizons would scrutinize every leaf and petal. Intrigued by rumors, Emile found himself brimming with curiosity about the visitor. On the day she arrived, he left his greenhouse and lingered near an ivy-clad wall that opened onto the main courtyard. Heavy doors creaked as a coach drawn by 4 sleek horses trundled forward. Soon it stopped, and a footman assisted a figure down, a tall, poised woman wrapped in a traveling cloak of deep green. Atop her head, a small, near-gold circlet sparkled in the late afternoon sun. Her name was Lady Clarice, or so he heard from the hushed excitement of the servants. She was rumored to be from the southern region, where warm ocean winds caressed bright shores, leaving sun-kissed valleys. No one knew exactly why she had come. Some said political negotiations. Others whispered of a prospective betrothal to one of the king's relatives, but all exuded a hush of respect whenever her name was mentioned. Emil continued to watch from behind a trellis of climbing roses, noting her graceful movements and the way her inquisitive eyes drifted over the tapestries of hedges, fruit trees, and creeping wisteria. Then, as if those sharp eyes could sense a gaze, she turned. For a moment, Emil felt that she looked directly at him. A flush of heat rose to his face, and he ducked back quickly, uncertain if she had really seen him at all. Yet in that fleeting instant he had glimpsed her expression, curiosity tinged with a mild amusement. That evening, while settling his tools, Emil pondered how to impress someone so refined. The estate's formal gardens were splendid to behold, rows of manicured shrubs and neat flower beds in symmetrical patterns. They looked luxurious under daylight shine, but he knew these features were typical of regal grounds across the realm. Perhaps Lady Clarice would admire the craftsmanship, but would it truly mark her memory? It was then he recalled an old legend, whispered among the older gardeners, a story told late at night in the warmth of the potting shed, the mysterious midnight roses. They were rumored to be a species that only blossomed when bathed in the glow of the moon, holding within their petals a faint luminescence. In the darkness, they shone like dim silver flame. Many had tried to cultivate them, but rarely did they thrive. The slightest mishap, too much water, the wrong soil acidity, the faintest temperature drop, and the delicate buds would vanish. Emile had once experimented with a single midnight rose seed, though it had withered too soon. He had tried to coax it to life in a hidden patch behind the greenhouse, away from prying eyes. He'd learned only fragments. These flowers needed a precise combination of moonlight exposure and nightly warmth, but his attempts were child's play compared to what legends suggested, and the seeds themselves were nearly impossible to procure. Yet, if Lady Clarice appreciated the obscure and extraordinary, surely nothing would capture her heart more than a living midnight rose. Thus began Emile's secret pursuit. Every evening, after finishing his customary chores, he would slip through a hidden opening in the perimeter wall and emerge into a tiny, seldom used courtyard overshadowed by tall ramparts. A single marble statue of a forgotten warrior stood close to a wall draped in thick vines. Here, the moonlight brushed the cobblestones for a sliver of the night, only to vanish behind the fortress towers. Emile believed that if he positioned pots in just the right spot, the flowers might drink the moonlight fleetingly, yet consistently. He located a traveling merchant who was rumored to have a stash of rare seeds. The merchant's price was steep, a month's worth of Emile's meager salary, but he exchanged the coins willingly, collecting 8 seeds of rumored midnight roses. They were small, grayish specks that, when held to the lantern, gleamed faintly. The merchant insisted that success required determination and faith in equal measure. Emile nodded, ready to risk precious time and salary for a shot at conjuring a miracle. Under the cover of twilight, he prepared the soil. It took him hours to mix the compost, ensure proper drainage, and place the pots so they would bathe in moonbeams. Finally, he pressed each seed into the warm earth, whispering small prayers. Being mindful that the seeds might be fragile, he didn't water them too heavily, nor did he keep them too dry. Like caring for a child, it required balance. By day, he performed his typical duties, trimming hedges and checking that each public garden bed flourished. Every so often, he caught glimpses of Lady Clarice, wandering with her attendants, pausing to admire the formal flower arrangements, or stroking a leaf with the tender curiosity of someone who appreciated nature. He watched from a distance, never daring to approach beyond a courteous bow if she passed. His heart thundered each time her glance landed on him, though it was never for more than a second. By night, he tended the hidden courtyard and the secret pots, and to his joy, after a little over a week, tiny sprouts emerged, delicate thin stems braced by minuscule leaves. He found himself grinning at these fragile signs of life. He was certain they were midnight roses. Over the following days, he made sure to fertilize gently at dusk, avoiding the stifling afternoon heat. Yet trouble arose one afternoon. Lord Andric's steward, complaining of a sudden shortage of topsoil, twisted his way into the greenhouse, searching for supplies. Emile held his breath as the man rummaged around, suspicious. The steward's footsteps echoed threat in every corner, but he never found the hidden courtyard door, nor the meager stash of pots. After the man left, Emile rushed out to check, only to discover that in his haste earlier, he had neglected to adequately shield the hidden hatch from view. Determined not to risk discovery, he took extra measures, draping vines, positioning decorative planters, anything to camouflage the entrance. The nights rolled on, and the sprouts grew taller. Moonlight gave their leaves a mystical sheen that Emile treasured. He would stand in silence, letting the night air cool his flushed cheeks, marveling at what he'd nurtured. At times, he allowed himself to imagine Lady Clarice standing beside him, similarly entranced by the shimmering petals. Yet he also recognized the impossibility of such a scenario. He was but a simple gardener, with no claim to nobility or prestige, and she, by every indication, was far above his station. As the friction of court politics increased, negotiations that threatened alliances and trade routes, whispers spread that Lady Clarice might soon depart. Each passing day chipped away at Emile's chance to show her the midnight roses in bloom. Desperation began to seep into his late-night efforts. He checked the buds constantly, willing them to open before it was too late. By now their stems were strong and healthy, displaying a faint silver sheen in the moonlight. Each night he hoped to witness the moment when the petals finally unfolded. One evening, as he left the greenhouse, the sky was laden with clouds that threatened rain. A fierce wind scuttled through the bailey, rattling every shutter. Emil's heart sank. The plants could be overwatered if the downpour lasted too long, jeopardizing the entire project. Still, he had no power to halt the storm, so he gathered protective tarps, ducking through the hidden door to secure the pot. Standing beneath the swirling clouds, he carefully propped the tarps to keep away the brunt of the rain. Adjusting the angles, he tried to leave a slight open space so the moonlight, if it emerged, could still reach them. He finished just as the lightning began, followed swiftly by the rumble of thunder. For an instant he considered remaining in the courtyard to protect them if the storm worsened, but the wind gusted, and the rain turned punishing. He ran for shelter, praying that his measures would be enough. The storm lasted deep into the night, lashing the castle walls. Emil hardly slept, heart pounding every time thunder shook the windows. At dawn, gray skies hung heavily over the ramparts. Rushing to the courtyard, he found water pooled thick along the cobblestones. Two of the tarps had torn free, leaving the pots exposed. Yet the fragile stems remained upright, the buds still intact and shimmering with droplets. Relief surged through him. They had survived. He took extraordinary care that day, nourishing the roots, fanning them gently to dry the leaves, and restabilizing the arrangement so that, come next moonrise, the flowers would face the pale light. Though worried about the storm's after effects, he silently reminded himself that the worst was over. Fortune favored him. That evening, the clouds parted, revealing the ivory glow of a nearly full moon. Feeling triumphant, he made his way to the courtyard. When he arrived, he realized that two buds had begun to edge open. The translucent petals parted slightly to reveal inner folds. The effect was mesmerizing. Thin silver lines at the edge of each petal and a faint luminescence that seemed to emanate from within. It formed a silhouette against the night. Emil felt a lump in his throat. The midnight roses were close to blossoming. He spent the next nights in anxious anticipation, unwavering in his belief that the visitor must see these blooms. But rumors abounded that Lady Clarice would leave soon. Each day she met with courtiers in tense negotiations or took morning carriage rides, from which she returned to the courtyard with a resigned air. He sensed she was restless. Perhaps she longed for something unforeseen to spark her spirit. Finally, the night he had awaited arrived. The moon shone full and clear, drenching the hidden courtyard with gentle radiance. The buds slowly unfurled, revealing petals that glowed as if kissed by starlight. Entranced, Emil forgot his cautious routine. He found himself desperate to share this wonder. Without quite thinking, he slipped from the courtyard, venturing into the corridors until he located a side entrance near the guests' rooms. Yet how could he alert Lady Clarice? Surely no guard would let a simple gardener approach her so late. The plan seemed impossible. His heart hammered as he pulled aside a tapestry along a lesser-used hallway. Lady Clarice herself was there, standing in dim candlelight with one of her attendants. She appeared troubled as she spoke in hushed tones, her brow furrowed. Before Emil could lose momentum, he stepped forward, daring to speak. "My lady," he said, voice trembling, "pardon my intrusion. There is something you must see in the courtyard now, if you would care to." Her attendant glared in suspicion, but Lady Clarice turned. Recognition flickered in her eyes. He saw curiosity spark as she lifted her chin. Perhaps it was the weariness of her negotiations, or the slight fascination she held for botanical wonders, but her decision came swiftly. "Very well," she said in a subdued voice. "Lead the way." With careful steps, Emil guided them down winding corridors, descending a cramped stairwell, then through the concealed door into the hidden courtyard. A glow from the moonlit sky fell upon them, and there, In neat rows stood half a dozen of the midnight rose plants in full bloom. Silvery petals radiated gentle light, capturing the essence of the moon and reflecting it with ethereal fragility. Lady Clarice inhaled sharply, her expression one of utter enchantment. She moved closer, kneeling beside the nearest rose. Her attendant was speechless, eyes wide. The air was thick with the perfume of the blossoms, a scent like honey mixed with the promise of dawn. Subtle, yet irresistible. The noblewoman reached out to graze a petal, lightly, as though touching a dream. The rose's gentle radiance made her eyes flicker with wonder. Emile watched, heart pounding, scarcely believing he had succeeded. He dared to speak softly. "These are midnight roses, my lady flowers, that only bloom in the moonlight. I cultivated them in secret so that you could see them before you depart." She turned to him, searching his face as though reading every line that told of his nights of labor. In that moment, a silent understanding passed between them. She recognized the devotion and care required to bring these fabled blossoms to life, and he, overwhelmed by her presence, prayed that the flowers conveyed his admiration. A slight smile came to her face. "I've read tales of these, but I never thought to witness them in person," she whispered. "Their blossom is rarer than any orchid I've encountered. How did you succeed where even the best gardeners have failed?" Her voice carried a tone of genuine awe. He swallowed hard. "I listened to them," he said simply. Then, fearing he sounded foolish, he added, "I tried to learn what they needed: precise moisture, moonlight, warmth, and patience." She seemed taken by his words. "Patience and devotion," she murmured, her eyes drifting back to the petals. For a time, none of them spoke. The beauty of the midnight roses was an unspoken language, uniting them under the moon's tender gaze. Finally, her attendant broke the silence. "My lady, we should return before anyone notices your absence." But the reluctance in Lady Clarice's posture was evident. She nodded in agreement only after some hesitation, standing slowly, her gaze lingering on the flowers, as if trying to etch the sight into her memory. Before departing, she turned to Emile once more. "These are extraordinary," she said, her voice soft, "and so are you for bringing them to life. My thanks." As she spoke, she slipped off a single ring from her finger, a small band of silver set with a modest opal. She gently placed it in Emile's palm, closing his fingers around it. "A token of gratitude," she explained. "No matter what tomorrow brings, know that you have accomplished something rare and wondrous." Their eyes met, and a faint warmth blossomed in Emile's chest, fulfilling his hope. Restrictions of rank and the cold realities of politics loomed. He sensed how precarious this moment was, like a delicate petal ready to flutter away at the slightest breeze. Lady Clarice turned gracefully and walked with her attendant back through the hidden door. Emile remained motionless in the courtyard for quite some time, still feeling the brush of her presence and the lingering scent of midnight roses. In the days that followed, Lady Clarice's negotiations ended, and her coach prepared for departure. From a corner of the courtyard, Emile watched her bid farewell to various lords and ladies. A swirl of formal goodbyes and orchestrated courtesy enveloped her. Then she ascended into her carriage. The door closed with a click, and the driver's whip cracked. Guards marched beside the horses as the procession exited through the portcullis. Emile leaned against a trellis and exhaled softly. To the onlookers, her visit was a mere chapter in the castle's long narrative of treaties and guests. But for Emile, it was a stirring story that might echo for a lifetime. Though unspoken, he felt certain that Lady Clarice had recognized his feelings woven into each bloom, the ardor and humility behind every moonlit petal. After her departure, he returned to his duties, trimming roses in the public garden and attending to the vast greenhouse. Yet a subtle change had taken root within him. He felt braver, as though the midnight rose's luminescence had lit a flame in his own heart. Some nights he visited the secret courtyard to find the blooms still radiant, a quiet recollection of that moment they had shared. Word soon spread among the staff that something new glowed behind the greenhouse, and though a few scullery maids peeked through cracks and whispered rumors of magical attributions, no official inquiry followed. The staff had more pressing tasks than worrying about a handful of luminous flowers. And so, Emile's horticultural marvel remained more or less his alone, an emblem of possibility. Months passed. The season waned from the green vibrancy of late summer to the crispness of autumn. One evening, as Emile sifted through seeds in the potting shed, he paused, recalling the ring Lady Clarice had given him. He carried it always, tucked safely in a small pouch around his neck, hidden beneath his tunic. Touching it, he remembered how her gaze had softened in the moonlight, how her voice had trembled in awe at the sight of the roses. Though he harbored no illusions of a grand romance with her, the memory comforted him like a cherished dream, because in that single fragile moment, he had bridged the gap between the gardener's spade and the noble's throne, guided solely by wonder. A rumor flitted through the castle a few weeks later, carried by a harried messenger. The domains were stable and alliances set. Lady Clarice had brokered a favorable agreement for Valentia, forging new trade routes that promised prosperity. People speculated that she might return someday, perhaps under more leisurely circumstances, yet no one held a more profound wish for her return than Emil. He imagined walking her through the entire estate in broad daylight, showing her every secret bloom, teaching her how each plant required a particular form of care. Perhaps in another lifetime, they might trade horticultural notes. Perhaps, in that distant future, he wouldn't have to rely on midnight roses in a hidden courtyard to speak to her. Emboldened by the memory of that night, he planted more seeds in the furthest greenhouse corner, hoping to replicate the hush of moonlight there. As the slow shift of seasons painted the land in gold and amber, the midnight roses continued to thrive in their hidden courtyard. While king and courtiers carried on with their duties, hardly sparing a thought for the quiet gardener, Emile found solace in the knowledge that one pair of eyes had recognized his devotion. Lady Clarice's ring remained a tangible reminder of that recognition. Sometimes, in the hush of late evening, he would slip out to the courtyard, watch the petals shimmer, and feel a surge of gratitude. Though Lady Clarice might never set foot in Valentia's castle again, he maintained hope. Love need not always lead to a grand union. Sometimes it existed simply as a shared glimpse of wonder, a bond transcending station or wealth, if only for a fleeting hour under moonlit petals. And in that brief midnight realm, a gardener could reveal the deepest corner of his heart to a visiting noble who appreciated the fragile miracle he had fought so tirelessly to bring forth. In time, the midnight roses became a legend among the younger servants. They whispered that if one gazed upon these blooms with true sincerity of heart, one would see not just a flower, but a secret reflection of possibility. Emil, knowing how their glow had changed his own life, ventured to think the rumor might hold some truth. Love, after all, often took root in unexpected places, flourishing like a rare blossom in the stillness of night. And so it was that in the ancient castle, overshadowed by high walls and storied tapestries, a quiet gardener's unflagging care for a rare flower bridged the distance between commoner and nobility for one enchanting moment. Within those old walls, under the benevolent gaze of the moon, the midnight roses had shone, testament to a devotion that defied rank, forging a memory that neither time nor miles could ever truly erase.